The skies above the kingdom were dark with the looming shadows of enemy ships. The kingdom of Phaedra had long been peaceful, but today the air was thick with fear. The enemy invaders had come from another galaxy, determined to take control of everything in their path. Their fleet was strong, and their technology was advanced. They had already captured several planets, and now Phaedra was their next target. Princess Lyra stood on the balcony of the palace, gazing out at the horizon. She could feel the weight of the kingdom's future pressing down on her shoulders. She was the only child of King Alaric, and as much as she wanted to believe in the safety of her home, she knew that no one could stop the enemy if they decided to strike. Her thoughts were interrupted when a guard rushed in, his face pale with fear. "Your Highness, they've taken the city walls. The invaders are closing in." Lyra's heart sank. The peaceful life she had known was slipping away, and she had no idea how to stop it. "Gather the soldiers," she ordered. "We will fight back." But the guard shook his head. "There's nothing left to fight with. They have already overrun the defense forces. The only hope left is ... someone else." "Someone else?" Lyra asked, confused. The guard nodded. "A human. A soldier from Earth." Lyra's mind raced. Earth. The distant planet that had no interest in the galaxy's wars? What could a human do to save them now? Before she could ask more questions, another messenger entered the room. This time, it was a familiar face. Captain Zoran, one of her trusted officers, arrived with urgent news. "Your Highness, we've just received word. The Earth Federation is sending a soldier to rescue you." Lyra blinked in disbelief. "Single soldier? Against an entire army?" Captain Zoran looked grim. "Yes, Your Highness. The human is highly skilled, known for taking down the fiercest opponents. His name is Marcus, and he's already on his way." Lyra was not sure what to think. She had heard stories about the humans of Earth, about their strength and resourcefulness. But it seemed impossible. Could one man truly save her? As the minutes turned into hours, Lyra paced back and forth in her chambers, trying to calm her nerves. She didn't know if this human soldier would arrive in time, or if he could even do what they claimed he could. She had seen countless warriors come and go, but none had ever been able to defeat the invaders. Still, she held on to a small thread of hope. If anyone could turn the tide, it would be someone from Earth. Suddenly, the sound of distant explosions shook the palace, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Lyra rushed to the balcony again, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the invaders. She could see the flashes of battle lighting up the sky, the city walls burning as the enemy advanced. In that moment, she heard a voice behind her. "Your Highness, I've come for you." She turned to see a man standing in the doorway, his figure outlined by the fading light. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a strong build, dressed in a simple but sturdy uniform. His eyes were sharp, blue, full of determination and purpose. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. This was Marcus, the human soldier who was supposed to save them. She had imagined him as someone more ordinary, but there was something different about him. He radiated confidence, as if he knew exactly what needed to be done. "Are you ... Marcus?" she asked, trying to hide the uncertainty in her voice. He nodded. "Yes, Your Highness. I've come to get you out of here." Lyra studied him for a moment. She had heard that Earth soldiers were tough, but seeing one in person was different. There was an air of quiet strength about him that made her believe in his mission, even if it seemed impossible. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice softer now. "But the city is falling. There's no way out." Marcus stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "We don't need to leave the city, just need to make sure you're safe." Lyra frowned. "And how do you plan on doing that?" He smiled, a small but confident grin. "I'll get you out of here. No one will touch you." Before she could respond, he turned and gestured to the hallway. "We need to move fast. The enemy is already inside the walls. We don't have much time." Lyra hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She knew she had no choice but to trust him. There was no other option. The kingdom depended on her survival. Together, they hurried down the corridor, the sounds of battle growing louder with each step. Lyra's heart raced as they reached a small, hidden passage that led outside the palace. Oh, the world outside was dark, and the air smelled of smoke and burning. The invaders were closing in, and Lyra could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her as they made their way through the palace grounds. Marcus kept a close eye on their surroundings. His movements were swift and calculated, his every step deliberate. It was clear that he had fought in battles before, and that experience made him a natural leader. "You're good at this," Lyra said, amazed by how smoothly he navigated the chaos. He glanced at her, a flicker of pride in his eyes. "Earth soldiers don't get to be bad at anything." Lyra couldn't help but smile. There was something about his confidence that put her at ease. Maybe, just maybe, he was the one who could turn the tide. As they reached the outer walls, Marcus paused and looked at her. "I need you to trust me. This isn't over yet." Lyra looked at him, her heart filled with a mix of hope and doubt. "I'll trust you." With those words, Marcus led the way through the final stretch of the battlefield. They were almost there, but Lyra could hear the sound of footsteps behind them. The enemy was closing in, and time was running out. As the battle raged on around them, Marcus's determination never wavered. He fought with a fierce intensity, protecting Lyra at every turn. She had no doubt that in this moment her life was in his hands, but she also realized that this was just the beginning. There was much more to this story, and much more at stake than just saving her. If Marcus truly was the hero he seemed to be, he would have to face challenges greater than anything either of them could imagine. The future of Phaedra depended on it. The air was thick with smoke, and the faint smell of fire lingered in the wind. The battle outside had only just begun, but the city of Phaedra was already in ruins. Buildings were falling, and the sounds of weapons clashing could be heard from all directions. The princess, Lyra, was safe for now. But her heart was heavy with worry. She couldn't help but wonder how much longer they would be able to hold out. Marcus had led her through the chaos, taking her to a hidden passage that no one else knew about. She had followed him without question, trusting him more than she had ever trusted anyone before. But now that they were hidden away in the royal chambers, away from the fighting, she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. "Are you all right, Your Highness?" Marcus's voice broke through her thoughts. His eyes were full of concern, but there was no hint of fear in his expression. Lyra nodded, though her mind was far from calm. "I'll be fine. But what about the city? What about the people?" "The city's fallen," Marcus said, his voice steady. "But we have time. We need to get you somewhere safe before they catch up with us." Lyra looked at him, trying to find any hint of doubt in his eyes, but there was nothing. He was confident, determined, and she knew he wasn't going to stop until she was safe. Still, there was a nagging feeling in the pit of her stomach. "What if they follow us here?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Marcus didn't answer right away. He was studying the door, making sure no one could hear them or sneak up on them. After a long moment, he turned to face her. "They won't," he said firmly, "but we need to move quickly. The longer we stay here, the more chance they'll catch up." Lyra swallowed hard. She had never felt so helpless before. As the princess, she had always been in control.
Oh.
She had made decisions for the good of her people, worked hard to protect the kingdom, but now she felt like a child again, completely dependent on someone else. "You said that Earth soldiers were good at everything," she said, trying to steady her nerves. "Do you really think you can defeat them? All of them?" Marcus hesitated, but only for a moment. His eyes softened, and he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I've seen worse," he said. "As long as you're with me, I won't let anything happen to you." Lyra wasn't sure what to say to that. The confidence in his voice was contagious, but it also made her feel like she was carrying the weight of the entire kingdom on her shoulders. It wasn't just about her survival anymore. It was about the survival of her people, her family, her legacy. "I don't know how to thank you for saving me," she said quietly, her gaze dropping to the floor. "But I don't want to be a burden. I'll do whatever I can to help." Marcus smiled at her, his expression softening. "You're not a burden. You're a princess. You've been trained for this. We'll get through this together." Despite his words, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that she was failing her people. She had always been the one who gave orders, who led with strength and wisdom. Now she was a helpless princess, hiding in a royal chamber, waiting for someone else to save her. It was a humbling experience, one that she didn't know how to handle. As they sat in the quiet room, the minutes felt like hours. The sounds of the battle outside were growing fainter, but Lyra knew that didn't mean they were safe. She had seen too much destruction already to believe that everything was over. In her mind, she was already planning their next move, thinking about what to do once they made it out of the palace. "You're not just a soldier, are you?" Lyra asked after a while. "You're something more." Marcus raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" Lyra thought for a moment. "You're not like the others I've met. You're calm, focused. I've seen warriors before, and none of them carry themselves the way you do." He smiled slightly, a hint of pride in his eyes. "I've had a lot of training. But it's not just about the skills you have. It's about what you're willing to risk, what you're willing to fight for." Lyra nodded, understanding now that there was much more to Marcus than she had originally thought. He wasn't just a soldier. He was someone who truly cared, someone who was willing to put his life on the line for others. "For her, that's what makes you different," she said softly. "You fight for something bigger than yourself." Marcus didn't say anything, but the way he looked at her made Lyra feel like he understood exactly what she meant. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she wasn't alone. In the middle of all this chaos, there was someone who had her back, someone who would fight for her. She was pulled from her thoughts by a sudden noise from the hallway. It was faint, but she could hear footsteps approaching. Her heart raced. Had the enemy found them already? Marcus held up a hand, signaling for silence. He motioned for Lyra to stay behind him, and she quickly obeyed, her pulse quickening in fear. The footsteps grew louder, and she could feel the tension in the air. Would this be it? Was this where their journey ended? The door creaked open, and Lyra's breath caught in her throat. But instead of enemy soldiers, a familiar face appeared. Captain Zoran, her trusted officer, stepped into the room, looking exhausted but relieved. "Your Highness," he said, bowing low. "We've managed to hold the outer defenses for now, but the enemy is regrouping. We need to move quickly. We've secured a transport ship that will take you to a safer location." Lyra felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you, Captain. I knew we couldn't hide here forever." Marcus turned to Zoran, his expression serious. "We don't have much time. We need to get to that transport now." Zoran nodded, glancing at Lyra. "We'll protect you, Your Highness. But we need to move fast. There's no telling how long the enemy will stay distracted." Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as she realized how close they were to escaping. But she also knew that the journey was far from over. There was much more to come, and she would need to be stronger than ever if they were to survive. She took a deep breath, standing tall. "Let's go," she said, her voice steady and determined. "We have a kingdom to save." The night sky was dark and filled with distant stars. Lyra stood at the edge of the transport ship's small window, staring out at the endless void. The city of Phaedra, her home, was far behind them now, left in the hands of the invaders. The sounds of battle still echoed in her mind. But the ship's hum was a reminder that they were safe, for now. Beside her, Marcus stood quietly, his eyes scanning the horizon. He was a man of few words, but his presence was a constant comfort. Lyra had no doubt that without him, she wouldn't be standing here. He had risked everything to rescue her, to get her out of the palace and away from the enemy. But despite their victory in escaping the palace, a heavy feeling hung over Lyra. She couldn't shake the thought that they were only just beginning their journey. The transport ship, though fast, was small. It had been a last-minute escape, something that had been hastily prepared by Captain Zoran and his men. They were headed for a hidden base in the far reaches of the galaxy, where the last remaining Federan forces were gathering to plan their next move. It was the only place that was still safe from the invaders, but the journey would take days. And Lyra knew that time was something they didn't have much of. As she turned away from the window, her thoughts were interrupted by the sharp voice of Captain Zoran. "Your Highness, we've just received word from your father," Zoran said, stepping into the small room where Lyra and Marcus stood. His face was stern, as it had been ever since the invasion began. King Alaric demands that you return immediately. He believes that your presence is needed in the capital to help rally the people. Lyra's heart sank at the mention of her father. She had not seen him since the day she left the palace. She had spoken to him through the palace communications, but that felt like a lifetime ago. The man who had always been so strong, so full of confidence, now seemed distant and unreachable. "I can't go back," Lyra said, her voice firm, though there was a hint of doubt in her words. "The capital is lost. The enemy is too strong. Going back now would be like walking straight into their hands." Zoran hesitated, as if he didn't want to contradict the princess, but duty was clear in his eyes. "Your father believes that if you are seen returning, the people will find hope. They will see you as a symbol of strength. He has ordered that you come back immediately to lead them." Lyra's chest tightened at the thought. She knew her father's pride. He had always been a ruler who relied on tradition and the idea that the royal family must lead the people no matter the cost. But now, after everything that had happened, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was a mistake. They were not in a position to fight back. Not yet. The battle had just begun. She turned to Marcus, who had been silent, listening to the exchange. His face was unreadable, but his eyes held a quiet understanding. "What should I do?" she asked. Him softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus took a step toward her, his gaze steady. "Your father is a good man, but he's not seeing the bigger picture. The enemy is here, and you need to be safe, not fighting a battle that's already lost. If you go back now, you might not make it out again." Lyra felt her heart race. She wanted to argue, to tell Marcus that her duty was to her people, but deep down, she knew he was right. The kingdom was falling apart, and there was nothing she could do to change that. Not yet. Not while the enemy had such a stronghold. "I have to go back," Lyra said, her voice trembling slightly. "My people need me. I can't let them think their princess has abandoned them." Marcus sighed, stepping closer to her. "Then let me go with you. I'll protect you. You don't have to face this alone." Lyra met his gaze, seeing the determination in his eyes. She knew he wasn't just saying this to comfort her. He truly believed in what he was offering. "I can't ask you to do that," she said softly, shaking her head. "You've already done more than enough. You've already saved my life. I won't put you in more danger." Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they know they can't change the other person's mind. "But they're still willing to stand by them." "Lyra," he said, using her name for the first time, "you don't have to ask me. I'm already here. And if you're going back, then I'm going with you." Her heart fluttered at the sound of her name on his lips. She had never heard him speak so tenderly before, and it made her feel something she couldn't quite explain. Perhaps it was the danger. Perhaps it was the uncertainty of their situation. But in that moment, she felt a connection to Marcus that went beyond just gratitude. It was more than just duty or survival. It was something deeper, something unspoken. Before she could respond, Captain Zorn returned, his expression even more urgent than before. "Your Highness, the enemy has located us." "We must leave immediately," he said, his voice sharp with alarm. "The transport ship isn't secure. We have to make our way to the hidden base now, before they catch up with us." Lyra felt a jolt of panic, but she didn't let it show. Her father's demands, the uncertainty of their future, it all seemed so far away now. The only thing that mattered was the here and now. Getting to safety, she looked at Marcus once more, and in that brief moment she realized something. He wasn't just her rescuer anymore. He was her protector. And together, they would face whatever came next. "Let's go," she said, her voice steady once again. "We leave now." The hidden base was miles away from the city, tucked deep within a remote asteroid belt. The transport ship hummed steadily as it cut through the dark emptiness of space. Inside, Lyra sat in the quiet cabin, her hands resting on her lap, trying to calm the storm of thoughts swirling in her mind. The days had felt long, each one filled with uncertainty and fear. She had thought escaping the palace would be the hardest part. But now, as they sped toward the base, the reality of their situation settled in. They were no longer just fighting an invasion. They were fighting for survival the enemy had made. It clear they would stop at nothing to claim the kingdom, and Lyra couldn't help but wonder how much longer they could outrun the danger. The ship's small crew moved about, making final preparations for their arrival. Captain Zoran was in the cockpit, coordinating with the other ships in their fleet, while Marcus kept a quiet watch near the door, his eyes always scanning the area, always alert. Lyra glanced over at him, noticing how he never seemed to relax. His calm demeanor had been a steady source of comfort, but she knew it wasn't just bravery that kept him so focused. It was the burden of responsibility, the weight of knowing that their survival rested on his shoulders just as much as hers. "You've been quiet," she said, breaking the silence between them. "Is everything all right?" Marcus turned toward her, his expression unreadable as always. But there was something in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. It wasn't just the usual determination. It was something darker, something weighed down by the danger of their situation. "It's just hard to relax when you know the enemy is out there," he said softly. "They've already destroyed so much. We've barely managed to escape. I'm not going to stop until we get to safety, but—" Lyra nodded. She understood. She knew better than anyone the fear of the unknown, the constant dread of what was to come. "We'll get there," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "You've brought me this far. We'll make it to the base." Marcus smiled faintly at her words, though it was clear he didn't fully believe them himself. "I hope you're right," he said quietly. The silence returned between them, only broken by the soft hum of the ship and the occasional buzz of communication from Captain Zoran. Hours passed, and as the ship entered the asteroid belt, the crew prepared for the next stage of the journey. The hidden base was in sight, and the crew knew they had to be careful. The last thing they needed was for the enemy to find them before they could land. "Ready the shields." Captain Zoran's voice came through the ship's intercom. "We're entering enemy radar range. We need to move fast." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She had hoped for a quiet, uneventful journey, but now it seemed the enemy was closing in faster than expected. The next few minutes were critical. The ship had to remain undetected. Marcus moved quickly, his movements precise as he checked the weapons and equipment. He didn't say a word, but Lyra could see the tension in his muscles, the way his jaw tightened as he prepared for what was coming. "Don't worry," he said after a moment, his eyes meeting hers. "We'll get through this. I won't let them find us." Lyra took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. She wanted to believe him. She had to believe him. As the ship entered the asteroid field, the lights flickered for a moment, a small reminder of the fragility of their situation. The field was dense, and the ship had to move carefully, avoiding large asteroid clusters while staying low enough to escape detection. "Prepare for turbulence," Captain Zoran called out from the cockpit. The ship shuddered as they navigated through the narrow gaps between the asteroids, the hum of the engines intensifying as they accelerated. Lyra gripped the edge of her seat, her eyes fixed on Marcus, who was standing by the door, his posture rigid. He was focused entirely on the controls, watching for any sign of danger. Suddenly a sharp alarm blared, and Lyra's heart dropped. The radar had detected something. "They've found us," Marcus said, his voice calm but tense. "We need to move now." Captain Zoran's voice came over the intercom. "Enemy ships are closing in. We have to make it to the base, or we'll be sitting ducks. Get to the guns, Marcus. We'll hold them off as long as we can." Lyra's heart raced as she followed Marcus's lead, running toward the back of the ship. She had no experience with weapons or combat, but she knew she had. To help, she grabbed a blaster from the wall and checked it quickly. She didn't know if she could use it, but there was no time to hesitate. Marcus took his place at the gun controls, and the ship shook again as the first enemy ship fired on them. The crew members scrambled to their posts, doing everything they could to stay ahead of the incoming attack. Lyra stood by Marcus, her hands gripping the blaster, trying to steady her nerves. She didn't have to be a soldier to know how much they were at risk. They were surrounded. "Ready?" Marcus said, his voice a whisper as he focused on the incoming threat. The ship shuddered again. "Da!" But this time it wasn't from the asteroid field, it was from the enemy's weaponry. Lyra's grip tightened on the blaster, her pulse racing. She had never imagined a battle like this. She had been trained to lead, to make decisions from behind a desk, not to fight for her life in the middle of space. The sound of gunfire echoed through the ship as Marcus opened fire on the enemy ships. His aim was perfect, and the enemy vessels began to fall back, retreating into the darkness. But Lyra knew this wouldn't last. They needed to get to the base, and they needed to do it fast. "We're almost there," Marcus said, his eyes never leaving the controls. "Hold on." The ship surged forward, its engines roaring as it pushed through the final stretch of the asteroid field. The hidden base was just ahead. You could see the faint outline of the station through the dust and debris. Suddenly another round of fire rocked the ship, and Lyra lost her balance, crashing to the floor. She scrambled to get back up, fear rising in her chest. "We're almost through," Marcus said, his voice steady as he maneuvered the ship with precision. With a final burst of speed, they broke through the asteroid belt and headed straight for the base. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as they entered the station's atmosphere. The ground ahead was rough, but it was the only chance they had. The ship landed hard, skidding slightly before coming to a stop. For a moment everything was silent. "We made it," Marcus said, his voice low but filled with relief. Lyra exhaled deeply, her body still trembling from the fight. They had made it. But she knew this was only the beginning. The battle for the kingdom had only just begun. The base was hidden deep inside the asteroid belt, a place so remote that only a few knew it existed. Lyra could see the station through the narrow windows of the transport ship as they landed. The base was quiet now, but she could feel the tension in the air. The battle had followed them all the way here, and there was no guarantee that they would remain safe for long. Once the ship touched down, Marcus was the first to exit, his eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. Lyra followed closely behind, her heart still racing from the journey. The crew quickly disembarked, moving with purpose as they secured the area. "This place is secure," Captain Zoran said, his voice low. "But we can't stay here long. The enemy will be coming after us soon. We need to plan our next move." Lyra nodded, but her mind was focused on something else. Her father, King Alaric, was still somewhere out there, and the kingdom was still under attack. There was no time to rest, no time to mourn the loss of her people. If she wanted to save her home, she needed to act now. Marcus approached her, his face calm, but with a clear hint of concern in his eyes. "Your Highness, you've been through a lot. You need to rest." Lyra shook her head. "There's no time for rest. My people need me. We need to fight back." "I understand," Marcus said, his tone gentle but firm. "But you can't do it alone. You need to stay strong, and that means taking care of yourself first." Lyra met his gaze, and for the first time since their escape she allowed herself to feel the weight of everything they were facing. She had always been the one in control, the one who made the decisions. But now, she realized how much she depended on those around her. "I can't give up," she said, her voice steady. "Not when everything is at stake." Marcus nodded, respect in his eyes. "We won't let you. We're in this together." The words felt like a promise, and for the first time in days, Lyra allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. As they moved into the base's command center, Captain Zoran began organizing the remaining forces. The situation was worse than they had feared. The enemy had already taken control of several key planets, and now they were setting their sights on the remaining strongholds. Phaedra was one of the last standing, and if they didn't act quickly, it would fall as well. "We have to rally our people," Lyra said, stepping forward. "We can't just sit here and wait. If the enemy is coming, we need to be ready." Captain Zoran nodded in agreement. "We've been preparing for this. The rest of the fleet will join us soon, but we can't afford to wait for reinforcements. We'll have to strike first." Marcus stepped forward, his voice calm but full of determination. "We've fought in worse conditions. If we hit them hard enough, we can push them back." Lyra looked at the map of the galaxy spread out on the table before them. The enemy's forces were overwhelming, but they still had a chance. If they could hold the line long enough, Maybe they could turn the tide. We need to make sure the people of Phaedra are safe first, she said. They're the heart of our kingdom. Without them, we have nothing, Zoran agreed. We'll prioritize the evacuation of civilians. Can't afford to lose the population while we fight. Marcus nodded. I'll lead the evacuation team. We'll get the civilians out of harm's way, but we'll need every able-bodied person to defend the city once we get them to safety. Lyra felt a surge of pride in Marcus's leadership. He was more than just a soldier, he was a true leader. And though they had only known each other for a short time, Lyra couldn't help but feel a deep trust in him. Thank you, Marcus, she said softly. I don't know what I would do without you. Marcus glanced at her, his eyes warm but serious. You'll never have to find out. The plan was set in motion. As Lyra and Marcus prepared to lead their people to safety, Captain Zoran organized the defense forces. The enemy was coming, and they had no time to waste. The fate of Phaedra depended on them all. As the evacuation began, Lyra walked through the crowded halls of the base, her heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. The people of Phaedra had always relied on her strength, but now she felt the burden of leadership more than ever. The kingdom was on the brink of destruction, and she was the only one who could stop it. But as she walked, something caught her eye. A group of civilians had gathered near the entrance of the base, and among them was a young girl, no older than 10. The child was holding a small, worn-out doll, her eyes wide with fear. She clutched the doll tightly as though it was the only thing keeping her grounded in the chaos. Lyra's heart broke as she approached the girl. She knelt down to her level, her eyes soft with compassion. Are you all right? Lyra asked gently. The girl nodded, her lip trembling. I'm scared. She whispered. Lyra smiled, offering the girl a hand. It's all right to be scared. We're going to make it through this together. The girl's eyes filled with tears as she took Lyra's hand. Promise? Promise, Lyra said, her voice full of conviction. As the evacuation continued, Lyra's heart swelled with pride. People of Phaedra were resilient, strong, they were survivors, and with Marcus, Captain Zoran, and the rest of their team by her side, Lyra knew they had a fighting chance. The enemy was closing in, but they would not go down without a fight. The sound of distant explosions filled the air as Lyra stood in front of the command center, staring out into the vastness of space. The situation had grown worse since they had landed at the hidden base. The enemy was closing in, and though their forces were ready to fight, Lyra knew that they were running out of time. The evacuation had been a success. But now, their goal was to protect the heart of their kingdom, its people. Couldn't afford to lose the civilians they had saved. The base, though well defended, was not a permanent solution. The enemy would eventually find them. And when they did, they would be ready. Lyra took a deep breath, trying to push aside the doubts that had started to creep into her mind. There was still hope, but it was fragile. She had been raised to lead, to inspire. But this war was different. It was not about winning a battle, it was about survival, Your Highness. Captain Zoran's voice interrupted her thoughts. He had been busy coordinating the defense teams, but now he stepped into the room, his face serious. The enemy is on the move. They're coming for the base. Lyra nodded, her heart sinking. The enemy had been relentless. Each day felt like a countdown to the final confrontation. But there was no turning back now. They couldn't run any longer. Is the evacuation complete? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Yes, Your Highness, Zoran replied. The last of the civilians have been moved to the safe zones. The remaining forces are ready to fight. Lyra glanced over at Marcus, who had been standing nearby, quietly watching the exchange. His presence was a source of comfort, but it also reminded her of how much was at stake. They had fought together, survived together, but the true test was still to come. We need to prepare for battle, Lyra said, her voice steady. We can't wait for the enemy to reach us. We need to strike first. Marcus stepped forward, his expression serious. I agree. My God. If we can take the fight to them, we have a better chance of weakening their forces before they reach the base. But we'll need to move quickly. Zoran nodded. We've been setting up defensive lines around the base. We'll need every soldier we have to hold them off. Lyra looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the soldiers and commanders, who were all standing ready, waiting for her orders. She could see the resolve in their faces. They weren't just fighting for their survival, they were fighting for their future. "I won't let you down," Lyra said, her voice filled with conviction. "We will fight together as one." The soldiers cheered, and for the first time in days, Lyra felt a spark of hope. She wasn't alone. They weren't alone. They had each other, and that was enough. Hours later, the battle had begun. Lyra stood at the front lines, watching as the first wave of enemy ships appeared in the distance. The sky was filled with the sounds of battle, laser fire cutting through the darkness as both sides clashed in the cold expanse of space. The enemy had brought their full force, but Lyra's forces were determined. They wouldn't go down without a fight. Beside her, Marcus was working alongside the defense team, guiding them as they set up their weapons and shields. He was calm, focused, but Lyra could see the tension in his eyes. He knew how high the stakes were, just as much as she did. "We need to hold them off long enough for the reinforcements to arrive," Marcus said, his voice low. "Once we do, we'll have a chance." Lyra nodded. "We'll make it. We can't let them destroy everything we've worked for." The battle raged on, and Lyra could feel the ground shaking beneath her feet. The enemy ships were relentless, but so were her people. They fought with everything they had, fighting for their families, their homes, their future. As the hours passed, the tension grew. The enemy was pushing harder now, using everything in their power to break through the defense lines. Lyra's soldiers held firm. They didn't give an inch. "I need to go out there," Lyra said, her voice filled with determination. She couldn't just sit back while her people were fighting. She had to lead them, even if it meant putting herself in danger. Marcus turned to her, his face full of concern. "You can't. It's too dangerous." Lyra shook her head, her eyes fierce. "I won't hide while they fight for us. I'm the princess. I'm supposed to be leading them. Can't ask them to do something I'm not willing to do myself." Marcus hesitated for a moment before nodding. "And I'm coming with you. You're not doing this alone." Lyra gave him a small smile, grateful for his support. "We do this together." The final push, the battle reached its peak as the enemy closed in on their position. Lyra, Marcus, and the rest of the defense team fought alongside each other. Their movements synchronized as they pushed back against the invaders. The enemy was strong, but so were they. With each blast of energy, with each victory, Lyra felt her heart fill with hope. The people of Phaedra were fighting for something more than just survival. They were fighting for their future, and they weren't going to let anyone take that away from them. As the battle raged on, the enemy ships began to falter. Their numbers were dwindling, and Lyra could see the first signs of defeat in their ranks. She could feel the tide turning. "They were winning. This is it," Marcus said, his voice full of determination. "We've broken through their lines." Lyra's eyes shone with pride as she looked around at the soldiers who had fought so bravely. They had done it. They had held their ground, and now the enemy was retreating. The sound of gunfire began to slow, and soon the battlefield was silent. The enemy had been driven back, and the kingdom was safe for now. Lyra stood amidst the wreckage of the battlefield, her heart still pounding in her chest. They had won, but it had come at a cost. So many lives had been lost, but she knew this. Victory would not be in vain. It was just the beginning. "We did it," she said quietly, looking at Marcus. Marcus nodded, his face weary but filled with pride. Together, Lyra smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. The kingdom had survived, and so had they. It wasn't the end, but it was a new beginning, a new chapter for PHA. Aderith. As the soldiers celebrated their victory, Lyra knew one thing for sure. The future of her kingdom would be built on the strength of its people and the bond they shared. Together, they could face anything.